Why do medieval villages in Europe look the way they do? The first thing that strikes you when looking at old maps is their surprising, seemingly chaotic and confusing layout. However, behind every bend in a narrow street and every location of a house, there was cold calculation and vital necessity. In those days, architecture was not a matter of aesthetics, but a matter of survival in harsh natural conditions and constant threats. On the north side of the house, solid walls were usually built or utility rooms were added. This created an additional protective barrier against the piercing cold coming from the forests and wastelands. Building traditions were passed down from father to son as a set of proven rules for preserving life. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the usual roof slope and wind direction determined the fate of an entire generation of peasants. We will analyze why a steep roof slope was the only way to save a house from collapsing under the weight of snow. You will see how the direction of the prevailing winds forced people to build entire streets at a certain angle. Every detail of medieval life was imbued with deep meaning and centuries of practical experience. The history of an ordinary house will reveal to you the secrets of the resilience and wisdom of our distant ancestors. To begin with, I will reveal a secret that changes everything we know about rural life in the past. Medieval villages were never built according to a plan drawn up on paper in advance, but they had a deep internal logic. Houses were often arranged in a circle or a tight semicircle, creating a natural barrier to the outside world. This shape allowed residents to keep livestock in the center of the settlement under common supervision. Each stone in the foundation was laid with consideration for how it would help the neighbor. In those days, loneliness meant quick death from hunger or wild animals. Collective work made it possible to build complex hydraulic structures and protective moats. People understood that the strength of the entire village depended on the condition of the weakest house. It is important to note that the layout even took into account the trajectory of the sun throughout the day. The southern walls were made more massive so that they would accumulate heat and release it at night. It was a primitive but extremely effective system of passive heating for living quarters. There were practically no windows on the north side to keep out the winter cold. Every tree planted inside the ring of houses had its own purpose. Fruit trees provided shade in summer and food in autumn without taking up extra space. The root system of shrubs helped to strengthen the soil around common buildings. All the village's resources were strictly distributed among families in a fair manner. Particular attention was paid to the location of stables and barns in relation to residential areas. The smell and waste products of animals had to be removed beyond the common circle. This required the creation of a system of slopes and drainage ditches that worked by gravity. This maintained relative cleanliness in the center of the settlement. Communal barns were built on the driest and most ventilated areas of land. Grain was the main source of wealth, which had to be preserved at all costs. The walls of these storage facilities were often twice as thick as those of ordinary dwellings. Respected elders were assigned to guard the communal stores. Social ties were literally woven into the architectural fabric of the village. Related families often built their houses close to each other, forming small neighborhoods. This allowed them to look after children and the elderly without being distracted from their hard work in the fields. Solidarity was the foundation on which the entire life of the settlement was based. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? And do you agree that collectivism was the only way to survive? Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next explorations of ancient life. Are you ready to learn the truth about how our ancestors tamed the elements without modern technology? One of the main problems for medieval people was the cold, piercing wind that could blow away the last bit of warmth. Villages were designed so that the main streets were not straight and long. The bends in the roads served as natural breakwaters for powerful air currents. This layout broke the wind into weak and safe eddies. Houses were placed with their ends facing the prevailing winds to minimize the area of contact. This allowed for significant savings in scarce firewood and preserved the health of the inhabitants. The interior of the rooms remained protected even in the harshest storms. The layout also took into account the landscape, using hills and forests as additional shields. If the village was located in an open area, the outermost houses were always more massive. They took the brunt of the elements, protecting the more fragile buildings inside. The windows in such buildings were made tiny and were located only on the leeward side. The inner courtyards were protected by high fences or small outbuildings. This created a special microclimate that allowed heat-loving plants to be grown. Even planting trees around the settlement was of strategic importance for overall wind protection. People understood the physics of nature on an intuitive level and passed on their experience. Every detail of the roof was designed with the aerodynamics of the time in mind. The eaves were made long to divert air currents away from the walls. This prevented the clay plaster from getting wet and subsequently deteriorating. Straw was laid at a certain angle so that the wind could not ruffle it. If the village was located in a mountainous area, the houses literally bit into the slopes. This allowed the earth to be used as natural insulation for the rear of the building. The front always faced the valley, catching the rare rays of the winter sun. Such integration into the terrain saved the houses from avalanches and heavy rockfalls. Hedges of thorny shrubs played a special role in protecting against the wind. They not only marked boundaries, but also served as a dense filter for dust and snow. In winter, these thickets held back snowdrifts on the outskirts, preventing them from blocking the entrances to houses. In spring, they were the first to wake up, signaling the start of fieldwork. Chimneys, if any, were always located, taking into account the prevailing winds. This was necessary to create proper draft in the stove and prevent smoke from filling the room. Peasants closely monitored the direction of smoke from neighboring chimneys. Based on its behavior, they predicted weather changes for the next few days.
A storm brews.
The wind will pick up.
Even the shape of the fences inside the village contributed to the proper distribution of air. They were not solid, which allowed the wind to seep through without creating powerful eddies. This protected the roofs from being torn off during autumn storms. The wisdom of the ancestors was manifested in their ability to negotiate with nature rather than fight it. Do you agree that modern cities have become more vulnerable to the climate than ancient settlements? Please share your thoughts on this in the comments. In the next chapter, you will learn how mud and sewage forced people to build houses at incredible angles. You definitely haven't heard about this unique secret in your school textbooks before. Many people believe that the crooked streets of the Middle Ages are a sign of ignorance or coincidence. In fact, it was a complex and well-thought-out engineering system of the time. The slope of the roads was always calculated so that rainwater would drain to specific locations. Streets often had a concave shape, with the central part serving as a drainage ditch. This prevented flooding of cellars where food supplies for the whole winter were stored. Without such a system, the village would have turned into an impassable swamp after the first downpour. Every puddle on the main square was a signal for immediate drainage repairs. The material for the roads was chosen based on its ability to absorb moisture or direct its flow. Where the soil was soft, fascines, bundles of ordinary brushwood, were used. They were laid under the top layer of soil, creating a reliable and durable framework. This prevented heavy carts carrying grain from getting stuck in deep mud. Houses were built on natural elevations or artificially created embankments. The entrances to dwellings were often several steps above ground level. This protected the interior from dampness and melting snow in the spring. Every decision was made based on centuries of experience in dealing with excess moisture.
More secure as the transition to stone construction.
An important part of the infrastructure was the communal cesspools on the outskirts of the settlement. Narrow gutters, carved out of stone or lined with thick clay, led to them. This allowed dirty water to be drained away from drinking water sources and wells. Water purity was a matter of life and death for the entire community. The drainage system was regularly cleaned by all the villagers during communal workdays. Clogging the ditch was considered a serious offense, punishable by a large fine. People understood that stagnant water attracts dangerous insects and pollutes the air. Collective discipline helped maintain basic order in harsh conditions. During heavy floods, the peasants used a system of temporary dams made of sandbags. They were installed in predetermined locations to divert the flow away from residential buildings. These skills were passed down from father to son as an essential part of survival knowledge. The coordination of the entire village at such times was simply amazing. Even the layout of the gardens was designed to ensure proper drainage of excess water. The beds were placed on a slight slope so that the roots of the plants would not rot from moisture. There were always boundaries between the plots, which served as additional drainage channels. The garden was not only a source of food, but also part of the engineering network. In winter, they tried to clear the roads of snow so that it would not accumulate against the walls. Meltwater was the main enemy of the wooden and clay foundations of medieval huts. Experienced builders always advised lining the base of the house with large stones for better ventilation. This extended the life of the building by several decades. Like this video if you are amazed by the ingenuity of the people of that time. Also, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about the secrets of ancient construction.
The thick layer of straw.
Guess how long it took medieval peasants to realize the advantages of stone? In the early Middle Ages, wood was the main and most accessible building material. However, it was extremely short-lived and caught fire very easily from any spark. Gradually, important buildings began to be constructed exclusively from durable wild stone. This required enormous effort from the entire community and many months of hard work. Stone walls retained heat better in winter and kept buildings pleasantly cool in the summer heat. This was critical for the reliable storage of grain and other supplies. However, residential buildings remained a combination of materials for a long time due to the high cost of masonry. The roofs were covered with a thick layer of straw or local reeds collected from the marshes. This provided excellent insulation, but required annual and painstaking repairs. The thickness of the straw layer could reach half a meter, which made the roof impermeable. Snow simply rolled off such steep slopes without lingering for long. The rafter systems were made of oak, which only became stronger over time. The use of local materials allowed the village to be completely self-sufficient from the outside world. Every tree in the forest was counted and used efficiently. Pine was used for interior decoration and oak for load-bearing beams. Stone foundations were laid at a considerable depth so that the building would not move during frosts. A layer of birch bark was often laid between the stones to protect against rising moisture. This was one of the first examples of the use of waterproofing in folk construction. Such houses could stand for centuries, changing generations of owners. The wooden parts of the house were generously coated with tar or resin to protect them from rotting. This gave the buildings a characteristic dark color and the specific smell of fresh forest. The process of coating was repeated every few years, especially on the lower crowns of the log house. Caring for the preservation of the house was a daily ritual for every owner. In some regions, the walls were woven from willow twigs and coated with thick clay. This technology was called half-timbering and allowed houses to be built very quickly and cheaply. The clay was mixed with horse manure and chopped straw to give it strength. After drying, such a wall became as hard as modern concrete. Sometimes cavities were left inside the walls and filled with dry leaves or sawdust for insulation. This significantly reduced heat loss during the cold winter months. Peasants constantly experimented with the composition of the plaster, searching for the ideal formula for durability. Engineering ideas worked for the benefit of each individual household. Particular attention was paid to fire safety in the densely built-up medieval village. Stoves were lined with stone on all sides to prevent sparks from flying. Thatched roofs were sometimes coated with a thin layer of liquid clay to protect them from fire. Fear of fire was the main incentive for the transition to stone construction. What do you think was the most valuable material for a peasant at that time? In the next chapter, you will learn how they coped with this terrible weather inside their homes. The interior of a medieval house was organized around a single point, the hearth. Fire was a source of light, heat, and a place to cook all the food for the family.
You will be ready soon.
Its central location determined the entire layout of the living and utility areas. Smoke often did not have a direct outlet through a chimney, but rose under the roof. Fire was considered the true heart of the home and should never be allowed to go out completely.
Careful now.
In the evening, the coals were carefully covered with ash so that a new flame could be quickly rekindled in the morning. The entire daily logistics of a peasant family revolved around the hearth. Women spent most of their day here, engaged in endless cooking and heating water. This place united generations, as it was here that the elders told stories to the children during long evenings. This seems strange to modern people, but such a system had its practical advantages. The layer of smoke prevented the straw from rotting and protected the wood from harmful insects. The walls were coated with a mixture of clay and straw, which worked as an excellent insulator. The thickness of such walls allowed the heat accumulated during the day to be retained for a long time. Furniture in houses was minimal and often formed part of the building structure. Benches along the walls served as seats and additionally reinforced the foundation of the hut. Sleeping places were located significantly above floor level so that people would not freeze. Often the living area was located directly above the place where livestock was kept in winter. Massive benches were firmly dug into the earthen floor or attached to the lower logs of the log house. They served as chairs and chests for storing simple belongings. Tables were often folding or simply boards on trestles, which were removed after meals. The space had to remain free for work during the day. The high location of the beds saved not only from the cold, but also from the constant dampness of the floor.
This should gather enough.
The ceilings in such houses were made as low as possible to reduce the volume of heated air. This allowed the temperature inside the room to rise faster with minimal wood consumption. Each log was worth its weight in gold during the long winter months. Collecting deadwood in the forest was the responsibility of the younger members of the peasant family. The ceiling height in a typical hut barely exceeded the height of an adult man, which created an oppressive feeling. But such cramped conditions were a necessary measure in the face of fuel shortages and harsh winters. The energy from the hearth was not wasted on heating empty space under the roof, but was concentrated below. Finding firewood was hard work every day because the forest often belonged to the feudal lord. Peasants were only allowed to collect dry branches that had fallen to the ground naturally. Upon entering the house, people had to bow low, which both conserved heat and was a sign of respect. The massive oak door was tightly fitted to the jambs to eliminate even the slightest gaps. A high threshold prevented cold water and snow from entering the living space. An additional curtain acted as a barrier, creating an air gap between the street and the room. These engineering solutions were refined over centuries to preserve every bit of heat. Internal partitions in the house were rare, as they interfered with the free movement of heat. The whole family usually slept in one large room around a hearth that died down at night. This strengthened family ties and allowed for more efficient use of the only warm place. Privacy was an unaffordable luxury for the average medieval peasant.
Keeps us warm.
And the curtain holds back the chill.
For additional lighting, they used torches or small clay oil lamps. The light from them was dim, so they tried to finish their main work before sunset. The daily routine was completely subordinated to the natural cycles of light in the changing seasons. In winter, activity slowed down, giving way to domestic crafts and rest. Thin birch chips burned quickly and had to be constantly monitored. The smoke from oil lamps was heavy, and soot settled on people's faces and clothes. Due to poor lighting, needlework and tool repair required enormous visual strain. At dusk, people usually went to bed so as not to waste precious fuel and oil. In summer, the working day could last up to 18 hours without a break. Windows, if they were glazed, used ox bladders or thin sheets of mica. They let in little light but did an excellent job of keeping the heat inside the room during frost. At night, such windows were always closed with massive wooden shutters from the inside or outside. This turned the house into a real warm fortress for its inhabitants. Real glass cost a fortune and was only available to rich churches or castles. Ordinary people made do with materials they could find on their farms. Ox bladder was cloudy and yellowish, but it did not burst from sudden temperature changes. Mica was less common and was considered a sign of wealth in well-to-do peasant families. The thick shutters were locked with strong bolts, protecting not only from the cold, but also from forest predators. All household items had a dual purpose and were used as efficiently as possible every day. Dishes were stored on open shelves so that they were always at hand in a confined space. Tools for processing flax or leather were placed closer to the light from the windows. Each item had its rightful place, which did not change for many decades. This order allowed people to quickly find their way around the house, even in complete darkness. What researchers of everyday life have found in old archives is astonishing in its rationality. Grain barns were built with particular care, often surpassing houses in reliability. They were installed on special stone supports, similar to large forest mushrooms. This was done to prevent soil moisture from reaching the harvest. This design also reliably protected the supplies from small and cunning rodents. Mice could not overcome the wide and smooth stone caps of these supports. Inside the barn, A natural ventilation system was created through very narrow slits in the walls. The air had to circulate constantly so that the grain would not start to rot. Protecting food was essential for the survival of the entire village in harsh years of poor harvest. Therefore, barns were often guarded or located in the most protected places. The walls of such buildings were made of the most durable types of wood, resistant to moisture. The roofs of barns were regularly checked for even the smallest and most inconspicuous leaks. A single drop of water could spoil tons of precious produce in a matter of days. Knowledge of agricultural techniques and storage conditions was vital for every head of a family. The ability to preserve the harvest until the following spring was valued more highly than the ability to grow it. Experienced barn masters were held in high esteem by all their fellow villagers. The floor in the barn was often made of tightly fitted oak boards as thick as a palm. Microscopic gaps were left between the boards to allow fresh air to flow from bottom to top. The grain was poured into special bins, separated by variety and harvest time. Each pile had its own marking, understandable only to the owner or community elder. Interestingly, open flames were never used to light the barns. Any spark could cause an instant explosion of grain dust that had accumulated in the air over the years. Work inside was carried out only during daylight hours with the doors open. This was one of the strictest safety rules in the village. The keys to the communal barns were kept by several of the most reliable and honest people. Grain was distributed strictly by weight and only in the presence of witnesses from the community. This prevented theft and ensured the fair distribution of supplies in times of famine. Transparency in accounting was the key to peace and trust within the peasant world. To combat mold, the walls of the barns were sometimes whitewashed from the inside with freshly slaked caustic lime. It killed germs and created a clean environment for long-term food storage. Before storing a new harvest, the room was thoroughly swept and fumigated with dry herbs. Sanitation in the Middle Ages was much more important than is commonly believed today. In some villages, barns were built of brick if there were deposits of good clay nearby. Brick walls provided better protection against fire and accidental forest fires in hot weather. Such a building was considered a sign of wealth and prosperity for the entire rural community for years to come. Stone storage facilities were the real banks of the time, where capital was kept. Guess what happened next when people learned to build multi-story public storage facilities? In the next chapter, you will learn how land was distributed between rich and poor neighbors.
The harvest must be...
The location of houses in the village also reflected the social status and family ties of the owners. The richest and most influential families usually occupied plots in the very center of the settlement. Their yards were larger and had a greater number of various farm buildings. This allowed them to store more equipment and keep large numbers of livestock. Less affluent residents settled on the outskirts, serving as the first line of defense against threats. However, even the most modest farm was organized according to a single principle of strict functionality. Every square meter of land was used for a vegetable garden, a pen, or a small storage shed. There was simply no extra space in the dense ring of village buildings. Relations between neighbors were regulated not only by laws, but also by the architecture of the buildings themselves. Shared fences and passageways required constant communication and daily coordination of all actions. Conflicts over property boundaries were rare, as the land was often shared. The village was a single organism, where each element depended on the other. This unity was manifested in common holidays and hard joint labor in the fields. Architecture only reinforced this ancient communal way of life, making it unshakable. Neighbors always knew what was happening in the yard opposite, and this was the norm. The public nature of life was a guarantee of security and honesty in the eyes of the whole neighborhood. The size of a residential building was a direct indicator of the number of workers in a given family. Large families built additional extensions or second floors above the main rooms. This allowed all relatives to be housed under one warm roof during the winter. The expansion of housing was carried out collectively by all the men of the village over several days. The prestige of the family was also emphasized by the presence of a stone porch or carved window frames. These decorative elements had no practical use, but were highly valued by the community. The skill of the carpenter who decorated the house was discussed at all Sunday fairs and gatherings. Aesthetics broke into the harsh, everyday life through small details in the design of the facades. Plots for widows and orphans were usually located closer to the church or the mayor's house. The community took care of those who could not maintain their homes on their own.
duty.
They were helped with roof repairs and the delivery of firewood for the winter completely free of charge. It was a social insurance system built into the very structure of rural life. Young families often started by building a small temporary dwelling on the edge of their parents' plot. As they accumulated funds and had children, the house was gradually completed and expanded. Often, one family lived in the same place for 10 generations. Attachment to the land and roots was the basis of stability in medieval society. Even the locations of manure piles were strictly regulated by rules of good neighborliness and hygiene. They were placed as far away as possible from other people's windows and the common roads of the settlement. Violation of these rules led to protracted disputes which could only be resolved by the community court. Order in the village was maintained through mutual respect for each other's space and labor. The hierarchy was also evident in the right to use common pastures and forest lands. Those whose ancestors had founded the village many years ago were the first to exercise their rights. Newcomers and outsiders had to prove their usefulness to the community over the years. Only then were they allowed to build a full-fledged house inside the protective ring. Despite the absence of high stone walls, the villages had hidden defensive qualities. The rows of houses themselves, placed close to each other, formed a continuous line of defense. The only entrance to the village was often narrow and deliberately winding. This made it very difficult for enemy cavalry to advance quickly during a sudden raid. Fences and hedges were made of thorny shrubs or very strong oak poles. They created a real maze for strangers who did not know the location of passages and dead ends. Residents could quickly block the passages with heavy carts, logs, or barrels filled with stones. Tall towers or bell towers served as excellent observation points for early warning. Knowing every nook and cranny gave the locals a huge advantage over any enemy. Women and old people could quickly take refuge in stone churches, which were built to be sturdy. The windows in such buildings were located high up and were more like loopholes. The men of the village formed an organized militia, ready to defend their homes to the end. Defense was everyone's business, and the layout of the settlement only contributed to the overall victory. Thus, the village was transformed into a small fortress without unnecessary expenses for expensive fortifications. The unity of the people was much more effective than any stone walls or deep moats. The enemy often retreated when faced with such organized and fierce resistance from the peasants. A system of signal fires on hills was used to communicate between neighboring villages. At the sight of danger, the watchmen set fire to a pile of dry brushwood and straw prepared in advance. The smoke from the fire was visible for many kilometers around, summoning everyone to help. It was the first emergency warning system, operating at the speed of light. The basements of some houses were connected by secret underground passages for emergency evacuation. These tunnels led to the nearest dense forest or a hidden ravine beyond the settlement. Knowledge of such passages was kept strictly secret and was passed on only to family members. It was the last chance to escape if the village was completely captured by the enemy. The peasants' weapons were simple but extremely effective in close combat. They used reforged scythes, heavy axes for cutting wood, and long pitchforks. Every man learned from childhood to wield this simple but formidable arsenal of defense. Regular training on the outskirts of the village helped maintain combat fitness and discipline. Dogs played an important role, as they were the first to sense the approach of strangers in the silence of the night. The loud barking of hundreds of dogs was the best alarm system of the time, with no false alarms. The animals were full-fledged participants in the defense system, warning their owners of hidden threats. The loyalty of the dogs often saved the village from complete destruction during night attacks. Church fences were often made of the strongest stone and were quite high. If the outer perimeter was breached, they became the second and last line of defense. Inside, there was always a supply of water and dry bread in case of a long and exhausting siege. Religion and defense in the Middle Ages were inextricably linked in people's minds. The atmosphere of a united and hostile village exerted psychological pressure on the attackers. The cries, noise, and organized sorties of the defenders could force even experienced warriors to retreat. Peasants defended their only possessions and the lives of their loved ones with incredible ferocity. Heroism was commonplace in the history of every small medieval community. Medieval builders never went against the landscape. They integrated settlements into it organically. If a stream flowed nearby, houses were built along its banks, taking into account flooding. The use of natural terraces allowed for the creation of multi-level gardens with good soil drainage. The forest was seen as an endless source of building materials and extremely important fuel. The craftsmen of that time carefully studied the direction of the winds and the movement of water before laying the first stone. They understood that it was useless to fight the elements, so they tried to make them their allies. Houses were positioned so that hills protected them from cold northern air currents.
And the square
Every tree or large boulder could become part of the foundation or fence. Nature itself suggested the ideal locations for future streets and squares. However, logging was strictly regulated by the community to preserve the balance of resources for the future. The inhabitants understood that the destruction of trees would lead to soil erosion and deprive them of protection. The village was part of the ecosystem, not a foreign body on the face of the ancient land. Respect for nature was the key to the prosperity of many subsequent generations of peasants. The elders kept a close watch to ensure that no one cut down a young tree that had not yet grown strong. For every tree cut down, several new seedlings had to be planted in specific places. The forest was a sacred place for them, providing shelter and food, so they treated it with reverence. Violation of these rules was punishable by heavy fines or even expulsion from the community. People realized that the well-being of their grandchildren depended directly on the density of the surrounding forests. This deep understanding of nature allowed settlements to exist in one place for hundreds of years. The soil was fertilized naturally, and all waste products were put to good use. Water from clean sources was treasured as the greatest value, and its contamination was severely punished. People knew the properties of every herb and tree growing near their homes. The life cycle in such a village was virtually waste-free and as environmentally friendly as possible. Everything that was taken from the earth was eventually returned in the form of fertilizer for the fields. The cleanliness of rivers and streams was a matter of life and death for the entire community. Knowledge of medicinal herbs was passed down from mothers to daughters as the most valuable inheritance. Residents felt an inseparable connection to every bush and every spring on their territory. The architecture was merely a continuation of the natural landscape, made from the same materials. This balance was fragile, but incredibly sustainable in the long term. People did not consider themselves masters of nature, but merely its temporary guests. This worldview helped to avoid local environmental disasters for centuries. Local stone was used to build walls, and roofs were covered with straw or turf from nearby fields. As a result, houses blended in with the surrounding hills and forests, becoming almost invisible from a distance. If a building was destroyed, its materials simply became part of the earth, leaving no toxic waste behind. People tried not to take more from nature than they needed for a modest and honest life. This humility before the power of the surrounding world gave them a sense of security and stability. Proximity to the forest provided access not only to wood, but also to berries, mushrooms, and game. The forest was the village's second source of sustenance after the arable fields and good harvest years. There were strict rules for gathering nature's gifts so as not to deplete supplies too quickly. The community carefully monitored that no one took more than they needed. In times of famine, it was the riches of the forest that saved entire villages from certain death. Hunting was only allowed during certain seasons so that animals could raise their young in peace. The gathering of wild fruits also had its own time frame and clear boundaries for each family. Only the locals knew the secret forest paths, which served as additional protection from uninvited guests. The forest was perceived as a huge pantry, the keys to which were kept by the wise elders. Pastures for livestock were chosen in areas that were unsuitable for growing grain crops. This allowed the land to be used as efficiently as possible, leaving no empty and useless spaces. Alternating grazing and resting the land helped to preserve soil fertility for decades to come. Peasants were the first intuitive agronomists in human history. Cows and sheep were driven from one meadow to another, giving the grass time to fully recover. Marshy lowlands and steep hillsides, where it was impossible to sow grain, became ideal grazing areas. This helped to maintain biological diversity and prevent the depletion of the fertile topsoil. At the same time, the animals received the most succulent and varied diet from wild grasses. This system of farming was the result of centuries of observation of the behavior of the land. The use of natural stones for building paths and foundations prevented erosion of the topsoil. Stones were collected in the fields during plowing and immediately put to use on the farm. It was an ideal waste management system where every element found its logical place. Nature itself suggested the best engineering and construction solutions to people. Clearing the fields of stones was a difficult but necessary process before each sowing. The collected material was not thrown away, but carefully stored for the future needs of the community. These stones were used to build sturdy fences that served for decades without any repairs. Stone foundations protected wooden walls from rotting and contact with damp soil. Thus, even stones that interfered with agriculture were turned into a useful resource. The presence of ponds or backwaters near the village provided the inhabitants with fresh fish all year round. The condition of the water bodies was monitored as carefully as the cleanliness of the drinking water wells. It was forbidden to wash clothes or livestock in the ponds upstream from residential areas. Environmental awareness was woven into the rules of conduct for every member of the community. Fishing was strictly regulated so that the fish population could recover by the next season. Local residents often stocked the ponds themselves, bringing fry from nearby large rivers. The banks were reinforced with willow plantings to keep the water cool and clear even in the summer heat. The pond also served as an important reservoir in case of fire in the densely built-up village. Every drop of water was valued and protected as a guarantee of health and prosperity for all neighbors. Birds nesting on the roofs of houses were considered a good sign and protection against harmful insects. Peasants often made special niches in the walls for nesting useful, feathered neighbors. This was another example of the harmonious coexistence of humans with the living world. Mutual assistance between species helped maintain biological balance in rural areas. People did not try to speed up natural processes or cheat time. They understood that a period of active growth must always be followed by a time of quiet and recovery. Each holiday in the calendar was tied to a specific stage in the life of the earth and the forest. This synchronicity with the surrounding world gave medieval man a sense of stability and meaning. Life flowed slowly, but was filled with a deep understanding of one's place in the endless chain of nature. Over time, the layout of villages changed under the influence of new technologies and social shifts in society. The advent of more powerful plows and new cultivation methods led to the expansion of settlements. Streets gradually became wider, and houses became more spacious and brighter for residents. This was made possible by the development of mass glass production and improvements in material logistics. However, the basic principles of protection from the wind and collective survival have remained unchanged for centuries. Many modern European villages still retain the same framework that was laid down in ancient times. This is living history that you can touch with your hands as you stroll through the quiet old neighborhoods. We see the continuity of generations in every cobblestone and the slope of an old roof. Studying medieval architecture helps us understand the origins of our own modern culture. We see how limitations gave rise to ingenious solutions and how necessity brought people together in communities. These lessons from the past are still relevant today, reminding us of the importance of harmony with the environment. The architecture of the past teaches us to value resources and think about the future of our children. The medieval village is not a monument to poverty, but a hymn to human resilience and practicality. Every bend in its streets preserves the memory of a long struggle for life in difficult times. Today, we can only admire the wisdom of our ancestors, who created such sustainable systems of life. The legacy of the past lives on in our hearts and in modern architectural forms. The development of the road network in the late Middle Ages allowed villages to trade more actively with each other. This led to the emergence of market squares in the very center of large rural settlements. The village ceased to be a closed world, becoming part of the region's large economic system. New ideas and goods brought changes to the familiar way of life. The emergence of brick factories made durable buildings accessible even to the middle class of the peasantry. Wooden huts were gradually replaced by solid houses that could stand for centuries without major repairs. This significantly increased the level of fire safety and the overall comfort of people's lives. The village became more solid and well-appointed in appearance. The influence of the city also began to penetrate rural architecture through fashion and new materials. Decorative elements appeared on facades, borrowed from urban town hall or church architecture. Peasants sought to make their homes not only warm, but also beautiful in the eyes of those around them. The desire to stand out began to compete with the ancient communal traditions of uniformity. Many ancient villages have gradually turned into small, cozy towns, retaining their old layout. The center of such a town often remains the same old market square, with a well or town hall. Tourists from all over the world come to see these unique monuments to human ingenuity and labor. History continues to bring income to the descendants of those who created it with their sweat. We must carefully preserve these fragments of the past so as not to lose touch with our ancestors. Every restored hut or cleared old street is a contribution to the preservation of world culture. Knowing the history of one's home makes a person a more responsible citizen of their country. The past gives us a foundation for moving into the unknown future. Modern architects often draw on the experience of the past when designing eco-friendly settlements. The principles of wind protection, natural ventilation, and the use of local materials are coming back into fashion. We are returning to what our ancestors knew intuitively hundreds of years ago. The wisdom of the Middle Ages turns out to be surprisingly modern and useful today. We conclude our journey into the world of the medieval village, where every stone had a purpose. We have seen that the layout of these settlements was the result of a fierce struggle for survival and comfort. Ancient craftsmen knew how to turn limitations into advantages, creating durable and comfortable homes for their communities. These lessons from the past remind us of the importance of unity and respect for the nature around us. Which of these ancient building lessons do you think could be useful to us today in modern cities? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the near future in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us, and we will be sure to read each and every one of your comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new exciting episodes about the mysteries of our history.